Hey there, this is Bobby with the Rock Guys Podcast, and you are listening to Concerts That Made Us, the place where I get my rock fix.
Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
This is Concerts That Made Us. I'm your host Brian, and welcome to the season finale. And oh man, what an episode I have in store for you guys. But before we get into it, rate and review us on iTunes, find us and follow us on social media, just search for Concerts That Made Us Podcast. And of course, the best place to stay up to date with everything that is Concerts That Made Us is our website at www.concertsthatmadeuspodcast.com. Since it's the season finale, we'll be taking a short 2-week break. If you miss us during that time, there are 29 other episodes with some amazing guests for you to sink your teeth into. So now that that's all out of the way, my guest this week is the brilliant Ilan Rubin, the youngest person ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, drummer for such bands as 9einchnails, Angelsandairwaves. He's had a pretty amazing career so far, and has some pretty cool stories to share. So now, without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Ilan Rubin, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pinch me moment now to get you on the podcast, so I'm very excited.
Wow, likewise. Thanks for having me.
So to date, you've had an absolutely amazing career that I'm sure some rock stars twice your age would probably kill for. But before we get into it, do you want to tell the listeners a bit about your solo project? I know your song Talk, Talk, Talk is going to be playing us out this evening.
Yeah, well, it's my first solo single, if you will. I had released music for quite a while under a moniker, and I decided during the pandemic to have a semblance of a fresh start and start releasing music under my name and not having anything to hide behind. And Talk, Talk, Talk is the first single released as Ilan Rubin. Nice. So I wrote, played, and sang everything on the recording, as is my usual MO. But yeah, it's a song I'm very proud of, and it's just a taste of what's to come. It's always difficult figuring out what the first impression should be, but I did want to make it known that it would be different to what I've released in the past. So that's that.
Yeah. What made you decide to kind of take the leap to use your own name and make it a bit different from the past?
It was a combination of things, but really one thing that just continued to baffle me as time progressed was that although I wrote, played, and sang everything and made no secret that the New Regime, which is the moniker I wrote under, was me, people still had a tough time connecting the dots there. And I'm like, well, this is definitely a disservice I didn't foresee. And there was a while where I was like, well, it's too late now to kind of change. But, it's never too late. And it was a sort of eye-opening moment just with the world kind of getting flipped on its head, where I was just like, you know what? I don't want to come out of this with a year of quote-unquote wasted time. And the reason why I say quote-unquote is because I really made the most of the pandemic lockdown, personally and in terms of productivity. But I was like, I don't want to come out of this and pick up where I left off. I want to come out of this and start something new.
Yeah.
And those two things were the deciding factor. But going back to what I was starting my response with, I mean, I would literally open up a show as the New Regime for Angels and Airwaves, which is one of the bands I play drums for. I would then go and play drums on the very same stage 15 minutes later. And after that, I would get a variety of comments from people who would see me and be like, you look like the singer in the New Regime, or you look like the drummer in Angels and Airwaves. And I'm like, oh, okay, this has to change.
Yeah.
And so once again, pandemic kind of opened my eyes, and I thought, yeah, I'm doing myself a disservice, and I'm proud of what I do, so there's nothing to hide behind.
Exactly. You kind of remind me of, you've surely come across it, where a lot of people online say that the drummer from Nirvana looks an awful lot like the lead singer of the Foo Fighters.
Yeah, there you go. Of course, he has achieved monumental success, which is phenomenal and something to strive for.
Yeah, exactly. We'll move on to your career, so to speak.
Sure.
What would be your earliest musical memory?
My earliest musical memory, as a musician, or just music in general?
Music in general.
What comes to mind is a dabbling with Magical Mystery Tour.
Right.
I was about to say I don't know why. My dad is practically a Beatles fanatic, which is why it's in my blood. But and the Beatles are obviously one of my favorites today. But I did recall having a moment with he had a CD of it, because this was in the 90s. I was born in 88. Of course, he was the type of Beatles fan where he had all the Capitol releases because that's what came out in America. But then he ordered all the Parlophone releases from a record shop, so he had both.
Yeah.
And when everything was kind of transferred to CD, he got the CDs, and that was my introduction. And I don't really recall how or why, but I just remember looking at that CD quite a bit, and I'm the Walrus stuck out to me in particular. And it's a weird thing because my Beatles obsession did not start there.
Right.
But it was just in the house. Fast forward a couple of years later, at least, and the very first thing that my dad taught me was the fill that comes into I Am the Walrus when Ringo makes his introduction to the song. And then fast forward a few years later after that, because it still hadn't hit me, I then became pretty much a Beatles fanatic in my early mid-teens.
It tends to happen around then, doesn't it? It's like you're always aware of the Beatles, but when you hit your teen years, they really sink in and you realize how important they were.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, pardon me if you already know this, because it's hard for me to get through a musical conversation and not reference either the Beatles or Led Zeppelin. But with Led Zeppelin, that was a knock me over the head moment. And the reason why that influence has been so multidimensional with me is because initially my dad turned me on to Led Zeppelin as a drummer. And song one, album one, the drums are amazing and they're fascinating, and that pulls you in. Then you have the simpler sort of surface level of just enjoying great riffs and a great singer. Then you dive into actually understanding what the songs are doing. Then you get into a deeper level of kind of like subdividing all the different elements that make the whole as great as it is. So I was hit. I've literally been obsessed with Led Zeppelin since I was 8 years old,
Yeah.
And I give all my credit to Ringo, but there wasn't that primal attraction to the drumming of Ringo. Ringo is like an acquired appreciation. It's kind of like it's there, it does a great job, but if you really want to appreciate it, you kind of need to peel back some layers. It's not as apparent as, or as obvious, I should say, as, Bonham on Good Times, Bad Times. So I digress, but let's continue.
Okay. The very first single or album you ever purchased?
Oh, God, I actually don't recall. But what I will say is that growing up, there would an album would once I was fully into music as a mature 9-year-old or whatever it was, CDs kind of became a gift at holidays or whatever. So I do recall getting Wheels of Fire. No surprise, I had a 16-minute drum solo on it, and my dad liked Cream and said, you should listen to Cream. So still love Cream to this day. I do recall the 90s Led Zeppelin box set. That was like a holy grail moment to me. I'm like, oh my God, I am literally holding everything they've ever done in one box. That was like mind-boggling to me. And like I say, I'm already sounding redundant, but I remember being stuck at home sick one day, just feeling terrible. And my dad was like, you know what? I'm going to step out of the house for just a second. And he came back with what was brand new then, which was the Led Zeppelin BBC sessions.
Oh, man.
And so all these things, obviously within the same world, but these were like the new things to me that I was getting, but they were gifts more so than me kind of saving up some cash and going to Warehouse or Sam Goody or whatever the hell was around at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You definitely had a very good introduction to great music. I almost feel like you were set up that you couldn't fail when it comes to your music tastes or being a musician.
I'm very fortunate with that. What I do find funny is that I've met people either my age or older than me who eventually end up where I started because I had the guidance. And I never had, this may sound disappointing to some of your listeners or viewers, but I never had a rebellious bone in my body. So it wasn't like, really? I don't want to listen to my parents' music. It's like, no, this is great, so I'm going to listen to it. And a lot of the people I've encountered either weren't introduced to it and discovered it later on in life, or made a conscious effort to avoid it.
Right. It just wasn't cool enough.
Yeah. Until later years are like, you know what? This is actually a really good song. It's like, no shit. There you go.
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah. So it's people are funny.
They sure are. Before we get into the concerts you've played, so what was the first concert you ever attended?
Oh God, I'm so bad at this, and I do apologize because I know that was the premise of this interview. It's kind of it's definitely a blur, or else I would have a definitive answer for you.
Right.
My parents were always somewhat of the concert goer type, and they were more so, in their 20s, probably, teens and 20s, maybe a bit into their 30s. So I have no doubt that perhaps I was taken to something, because I do have this very vague recollection of seeing somebody perform on stage in what appeared to me then to be a sizable venue. I mean, for all I know, it was a tiny stage with 100 people watching, but at the time, it seemed like, okay, I'm at a concert. This is what a concert is. But it all sort of happened to me as both a viewer, listener, music fan, and musician. So pretty much when I started playing drums, my oldest brother, I'm the youngest of three, pretty much drafted me into his high school band. So there's a big blur between either watching a show or playing a show. And I started very early on, 8, 9 years old. I was already performing. And by, say, 11 years old, a few of the shows were fairly sizable. So it's just, there's kind of a blur there.
Yeah, I can understand.
But by 11, I was already I had played my first Warped Tour, and that's an experience that stands out because that would be the first sort of festival I had ever been to. Yeah. And that's at 11 years old. So it's there. Once again, it's in a hazy part of my memory. And, the following year after that, we played a week on the Warped Tour. And then 2 years after that, we played 3 weeks. So,
jeez.
That it was never my music per se, but it was a fantastic experience getting to play in front of people, kind of feeling that competitive spirit, where, because obviously I wasn't playing on a main stage at that point. In fact, I was playing on the smallest stage most of the time. but there was that sort of like competitive grit that was instilled, where it's like, how do we get more people to watch us instead of whoever else is around?
Yeah.
And one thing progressed to another, and I kept touring more and more and more, but I'm sure we'll get into that. So again, I digress, and I had an inarticulate and imprecise first concert.
Right. Okay. So the first professional gig that really made you feel like, yes, this is what I want to do with my life, and I'm actually starting to get places. What was that?
Well, that gig would not have been a professional gig by any means.
Okay.
Because it's many years, or usually it's many years before you have a professional gig. The first time I ever performed in public was at a battle of the bands in the high school gymnasium when I was 8 or 9. And that was a really fun moment. I didn't have, a semblance of nerves or stage fright or anything. And as a result of that, and the preceding concerts they just did a great job of making me feel comfortable performing in front of others. It was kind of embedded in me from such a young point, and I really think it's an advantage when being on stage is one of your comfort zones.
Yeah, it's a very rare thing.
Yeah, and I can imagine how difficult it would be for somebody who, say, hasn't been on stage until they're, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, which is usually when you kind of have that first moment. And I think people either gravitate towards it or they don't. But not even really having a precise start time and just kind of looking back and be like, oh, I've already been doing this for a few years, because I don't recall what I felt like at the time. I just recall enjoying it.
Yeah.
So that must have been a very formative experience for me. Like, to this day, I despise the hour before a show starts.
Really?
I hate it. I have all this like anxious energy where I just want to like sprint out onto the stage and just start playing. So the whole counting down, like, okay, hour, half an hour, 10 minutes. I'm like, come on, this is agony. Like, let's just go.
Yeah.
And then the second I'm either playing drums or I have a guitar on me and I step up to the microphone, I'm like, oh, now I can relax. Let's do it.
Oh man, if you could bottle that feeling now and sell it to people, you'd be a billionaire.
That'd be great. Yeah. Not a bad idea.
Exactly. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
But do you reckon it was a bit of a childhood naivety that you didn't realize there was such a thing as stage fright and you were so comfortable, or was it just you naturally gravitated towards performing?
I'm sure it was a combination of the two, because I mean, to this day, I'm somewhat shy. I used to be a lot worse as a kid, particularly a young kid. So in terms of being naive and just doing it, I'm sure that was a big part. But at the same time, I think I loved playing drums. I'm just going to play drums over here right now. And it was very natural. So, yeah.
Right.
But I sorry to cut you off. I remembered I was going to say something. Is that for shy people, there can be a sort of duality of the shy person and when the shy person kind of comes alive. And I'm sure it was a huge asset to actually have my instrument in front of me. So it's very easy to kind of feel isolated. Even though you're in front of other people, there's still a barrier between you and the crowd. So I think it was easy for me to sort of just get into my own zone, do my own thing, and kind of, in a way, shut people out. I mean, I've always been somewhat animated, and the older I got, I became more of a performer as a drummer. But having my instrument in front of me and around me definitely, I would imagine, made that transition into being a performer easier.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. I never thought of that because it's like almost a protection from the crowd, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's fascinating now. We'll skip forward to the last gig you've played. When would that have been?
That would have been sometime mid-March.
Right.
My band, The New Regime, was opening or supporting Silver Sun Pickups over here in the U.S. And obviously before the tour started, there were rumblings of COVID-19, coronavirus, however they wanted to brand it at the time. It's funny to me how these things kind of like have a name and then it changes into something else. But even though it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But so it was obviously somewhat known, but nobody was worried about it. And it was shocking to me, especially in hindsight, how within a week and a half, it went from, nothing to worry about, we'll finish out this tour and we'll see how everything goes, to then being like, we're probably only going to be able to do 2 more shows, to literally the next day pulling up to the venue and realizing that nobody is loaded in, and that was it.
Oh, man.
So it was like an exponential growth of shutdown. Mm-hmm. And I live on the West Coast of the U.S. I'm currently in San Diego right now. I'm actually, as I was telling you before we started recording, I'm down here rehearsing with Angels and Airwaves. So I'm actually staying with my parents. This is my illustrious childhood bedroom. And but I live in LA and I have a bunch of gear. So it was literally driving from Knoxville, Tennessee, which is a far way over east from San Diego, Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, this show is not going to happen. Time to drive home. Oh. So the 3 or 4 of us who were in the van drove straight back without stopping, dropped the gear off in San Diego, and then we all lived in LA. We all drove to LA and thought, at that time, we thought, well, let's see how this plays out. Everyone's claiming to reschedule in July, and obviously we know how that went. Yeah. But so that was my the show that never was Knoxville. I don't remember what the last show before Knoxville was, but I'm sure we could find it if we wanted to research a little bit. But yeah.
It must have been a weird feeling to drive back though, and the uncertainty of what was going to happen. And little did you think it'd be over a year until there was live gigs.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is it takes quite a few tanks of gas to get from Tennessee to California. And at that point, when you realize, okay, this is probably something to worry about, and we've been at merch booths and we've been meeting people, then you get into this zone where it's like, okay, well, now that that's over, we need to drive straight back and we're going to need to get gas, but we're going to ration hand sanitizer and make sure we're all washing our hands as much as possible and avoiding people and all this stuff. And yeah, by the time I got home, even within that 1.5 to 2 day period, my hands were like ashen white, practically peeling from the amount of sanitizing I was doing.
Yeah.
I felt like my hands looked like the Emperor in Star Wars, just like pasty white, pastier than I usually look. But my hands were just like flaky and disgusting.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so it was a bit eerie because all of a sudden you're looking at people and you're kind of like, you stay over there. I'll be over here.
Yeah, it's been a weird time. It's almost like some sort of a end of days film.
Yeah, which is and I wouldn't necessarily classify myself as twisted, but the first movie and the first book that I read, starting with the movie, was 28 Days Later. I'm like, this seems like a good thing to watch right now. And then the first book I read, because I am a history fan, I was like, that book about the Black Death that has been sitting on my bookshelf, I'm going to read it right now.
Oh, and, perfect timing.
Yeah. It's like no better time than now. Let's see what they used to deal with. Yeah. So
were you starting to look around for them old plague doctor suits just to be ready?
No, I wanted one of those masks with the long noses that they used to put herbs in to purify the death. But I didn't, now they just look festive. So like carnival or something. But yeah.
Yeah. Is there any upcoming gigs on the cards? Anything set in stone?
There sure are. The reason why I'm in San Diego rehearsing right now is because, dauntingly enough, the first show that Angels and Airwaves has in over a year and a half is Lollapalooza at the end of this month.
Oh, man.
So it's going to be a great one. I'm really looking forward to it. Fingers crossed. I hear this Delta variant is a pain in the ass, to say the least. But yeah, we actually had our first rehearsal yesterday, so it's already got, I don't know if you can see, but I'm already doing some damage to the hands here, but it's part of being ready.
Exactly.
It's like my preemptive boot camp. It's like, oh, if we're gonna start playing shows, I need to purposely tear the shit out of my hands so that my calluses come back.
I imagine it's like when you work out at the gym.
I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that's like.
I don't know myself anymore. It's been quite a few years, but I remember I used to wake up, and if I wasn't in pain the next day, I thought it was a wasted workout. So I imagine rehearsing is the same. If you don't have the blisters, it was wasted.
Yeah, no, you are totally right. I do feel I'm allergic to working out because it's the only time I'm thoroughly impatient.
Right.
I can do the most boring stuff for hours. Okay. Put me on an elliptical machine or a bike or something at the gym in hours fuck hours. I'm never in the gym for hours. Minutes feel like hours. And I then get in this train of thought where I'm like, I know there's something I could be doing better with my time right now. Like I'm literally running in place, sweating. This sucks. So I do feel the upper body soreness from playing, which is great. But the only athletic thing I take joy in is playing tennis, which is a fairly recent thing I've picked up. It's been about 4 years, but in doing that, I take lessons every Thursday, and my teacher runs me around to the point where the next day I feel like somebody just beat me severely, and I'm like, that was a good lesson. Yeah.
I've heard before that you're quite passionate about tennis. All right. 4 years though, that's kind of late in life to start, if you don't mind me saying.
No, it's one of my newfound regrets in life. And I don't understand it because my two older brothers played, and they were, competitors in their young age. They never had aspirations to be a professional tennis player, but it was a part of their upbringing. And we all got baseball as well, but I was put in baseball and I played for 4 years. I did thoroughly enjoy it. But even at that age, I'm like, this pales in comparison to music. This is something I'm doing during my kid years. But tennis is one of those things you do into old age, and it's a lifelong game and passion. And I'm so disappointed that I can't say I was disappointed that my parents didn't put me into it, but I'm disappointed that I didn't have the interest. And recently, 4 years ago, watching a match, saying like, you know what, that looks like fun. And it obviously seems like great exercise. Like, I'm going to try it for that. But then I actually just fell in love with the sport. And it's the only sport I care about. I like the one-on-one aspect, Best one on the court wins. There's nobody on the team to blow it for everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah. I wouldn't know the most about tennis myself now, but are you any good? How good are you?
I will say this. I think I'm good for the amount of time that I've been playing. I'm always trying to get better and better and better. So I'm constantly improving.
Good answer.
I enjoy it a lot, which is the most important. But
exactly.
Yeah, I definitely say I'm decent, but I'm always trying to get as good as I possibly can.
Yeah, like everything in life, I suppose.
Exactly.
So we'll move on to, I think this might be an interesting one. The worst experience you've had playing a concert.
Well, I will say that one of them is coming to mind right now. I was going to say that anytime a mistake is made, which is, I'm speaking frankly with you, I'm not being immodest. I very, very, very rarely make mistakes. I mean, years in between one mistake to the next.
Really?
Honestly, you know, a lot of mistakes come from either being psyching yourself out or being unprepared. I don't get psyched out, and I always put a thorough amount of time into being prepared. So if a mistake occurs, it's literally like a freak accident of like, I can't believe that just happened. That shocked me. But there's been, so back in 2009, this is what's coming to mind right now. There was, at that point in time, Nine Inch Nails was going away for a while or indefinitely. Didn't know whether that was the last show.
Right.
And we closed off the run with doing 4 shows in LA at different size venues. So if I'm not mistaken, we did Echoplex, which was the smallest one. We then did Henry Fonda. We did the Wiltern. We did the Palladium. But I want to say Wiltern was the last show of that run. And there was so much energy going into that show. It was also a ridiculously long set list. I think it was like 38 songs or something like that.
Jesus.
And I'm not exaggerating. Like a few encores, if I recall properly, and some guests came out to perform with us. But song number 1, we're playing Somewhat Damaged, which is in a time signature of 9/8, which is not all that common, especially in that kind of music. So... You know, you're either, I take it you're a musician?
I am somewhat a musician.
Okay. So, you know, if you're in 3/4, it's very easy to kind of get into the groove. If you're in 6/8, it's kind of double that. But 9/8 to me is slightly odd because the whole thing, by the time a measure turns around, it feels a little odd because it almost feels like it's 3 bars in one, depending on how fast it is. But, yeah, so Somewhat Damaged is in 9/8, 9/4, if some music theory guy wants to argue with me or something. But I'm just going to put that out there. But I must have had more energy than usual, and I was just kind of swinging my arms more than usual, I guess, because this was the first and only time that I like went to hit the snare and I pulled my in-ears clean out of my head.
Oh, man.
And you go from hearing isolated sound of everything that's going on to then just hearing chaos and not hearing any music whatsoever.
Oh, shit.
And that was awful. And considering how on the beat Nine Inch Nails has to be, let alone with playing a 9/8 with this song, I wanted to just shrivel up and die. But fortunately, there's a bit of the song where the drums cut out for a few bars. And by that point, I was able to get my in-ears back in.
Right.
And I was counted back in and we kind of locked back in. But for that moment, I'm like, this is done. This is a fucking train wreck. And I don't know how I'm going to get back. Fortunately, I did. Nothing else went wrong for the rest of the show. But that was terrifying.
I could imagine, Jesus.
Yeah.
You'd want the world to just swallow you up, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, that kind of gets you ready for moments where the monitor desk decides to shut off or there's some kind of power issue, because there's obviously a lot of wattage and amps, whatever you want to call it, going through everything. And there have been moments where either the PA shuts off and our monitor desk is working, so we're all rocking out thinking we're sounding great, but nobody's hearing us. Or we've had the opposite where the PA is on, but all the monitors shut off, and then we're like panicking, like, do we keep playing? What's happening? And that's all of those things are just awful moments. Yeah.
Did anyone else on stage notice the little mishap? Did Trent or anyone else notice?
Yeah, everybody noticed, because the kind of the band and the click were starting to do this.
Right.
And it's like, what's going on here? And then boom, everything was back in sync and went well. But hey, like I said, freak accident. I couldn't have had any sort of foresight for that one.
True. It must have been, I know you've probably spoke about this time and time again, but getting to play it with Nine Inch Nails, being in Nine Inch Nails, must have been one of them moments in life where it's a real holy shit moment. Like,
it certainly was. It certainly was. And it was a series of holy shit moments because, I was made aware that in 2007 at first was Leeds actually, but I'm talking about the Reading and Leeds festivals. But at Leeds in particular, I was told that Trent was watching me play in the band that I was playing in at the time. And I was really surprised by that for two reasons. One, I didn't know Trent.
Right.
And second of all, I'm like, there's no way in hell that Trent's on the stage to watch this band. There's just no way he would like this band ever. And that was kind of that. I was like, well, that's cool that Trent was watching. And at that time, Josh Freese was playing with Nine Inch Nails, and I've known Josh for quite a few years at this point. So I didn't really think anything of it or make anything of it. But less than a year later, I received an email directly from Trent saying, hey, Trent from Nine Inch Nails here. I saw you play at Reading or Leeds last year, and I thought you were exciting to watch, and I'm looking for a drummer, and I think you'd be great if you're interested in auditioning. I'm like, yes. So that was holy shit moment number one. And I was, of course, very excited, and I was like, this is an opportunity. Let's do this. I'm ready. He sent me the songs. I actually may be skipping a step because I had a friend, still have a friend. We're actually business partners in the drum company that I play called Q Drum Co. But I saw that. So pardon my blurring of the chronology. So Trent saw me play in 2007. About a year later, it was announced that Josh Freese was leaving the band.
Right.
Okay. So I was like, shit, I need to take advantage of this opportunity and find a way in. So I spoke to my friend who had been teching for Nine Inch Nails for a few years at that point. And I'm like, we got to find a way in here. Can you send me some live tracks or something that I can play along to? And I filmed myself in the garage. This was Halloween of 2008. I remember that specifically for some reason. Probably because people were like, oh, we're going to go have fun. And I'm like, I'm going to get to work because this is important here. And so I filmed myself playing Letting You and March of the Pigs. And I was wearing a Queen shirt in the video, which I think may have helped because I recall him commenting on the Queen shirt. Trent's a Queen fan as well. So I'm like, yes. But we never really talked about that video though, because weeks went by and then I got an email from him. So now I've put everything in proper context.
Yeah.
But at that point, I wasn't sure if he saw the video or if it was just fate, if we'll call it. Like, well, I need a new drummer, and I saw that guy last year, so let's get in touch with him. I don't know. I know he saw it, but basically when we spoke, I don't know what basically made him email me. And long story long, he sent me a list of songs. I learned them. Went out to, I want to say New Hampshire, so East Coast of the U.S., and Nails was on the Lights in the Sky tour, so I auditioned at a sound check. I've never talked about this, so considering I've been so bad at answering a lot of your very simple questions, I think I now feel comfortable enough. I mean, the thought of this story has made me feel ill on many occasions. But I basically had a weird mishap and flare up with my arm that I had never experienced prior to that, and I had never experienced it since. And it took me a really long time to piece together what happened. But basically, I was auditioning. It was going great. And then my arm seized up in a way where I could barely hold on to the drumstick, but I was actually looking at my arm and it was visibly swollen. Like, it freaked me out a little bit.
Jesus.
Because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm tense, so I need to loosen up. It's like something is physically happening to my arm that I've never experienced before. And at that point, we were playing so well together, and I could tell that he was into it and the band was into it. I made a serious gamble that paid off. But I went up to Trent. I'm like, hey, man, keep in mind, we pretty much just met. And I was like, hey, man, I don't know what's going on with my arm right now. But, and I explained what was going on. I was like, it's visibly swollen. Like, I'm barely holding onto a drumstick. I was like, I'm going to keep playing.
Right.
But I just want you to know in case somehow it affects my playing. Like, I'm right. At that point, he was like, hey, thanks for telling me. This hasn't happened before. I'm like, never. I'm like, but let's keep going. He's like, you know what? I don't worry about it. Like, everything was really good. Let me get back to you in just a second. So he went and met with the rest of the band, who at that time was just Robin and Justin Melville Johnson. And Alessandro Cortini was in the band at the time, but he wasn't at that sort of audition process because he was also leaving the band. So at this point when they're meeting, I'm like, did I just ruin my life right now by trying to get ahead of this potential problem? And so it was an agonizing few minutes. And Trent came back out. He's like, we all thought you did a great job playing. Would you mind coming with us to the next city? And we'll just kind of finish off the songs that we didn't get to play today. I'm like, yes, no problem. Let's go. He's like, cool. Watch the show tonight. Tour manager will tell you about, bus call and whatnot. Ride with us on the bus. And then we'll just finish up the songs at soundcheck tomorrow. And I'm like, thank God. Okay, great.
Oh, man.
Finish the rest of the songs. They had one last little chit chat. And it was like, we'd be honored if you joined the band. I'm like, oh, thank God. Okay, great. And that was that moment. But literally the thought of that, considering I've been with the band for like 12 years now, the thought of that experience has literally turned my stomach on many occasions. Oh. And basically, because I told you it took me months to figure out what happened, I somehow went through 20 years of my life without ever having blood drawn.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And I went to the doctor the day before I flew out to audition. And I went to the doctor for something else. And they're like, I realize you've never had blood drawn before, and I wouldn't feel like a good doctor unless I at least did like a basic panel. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, I don't like needles, but you're the doctor. If you got to do it, you got to do it. So, I cowardly closed my eyes and I was like, go, take it. And, and they always say, stay off your arm. Don't really use it much. And by tomorrow, you should be back to normal. I did not heed the doctor's advice, and I proceeded to play drums all day. And then I took a 5-hour flight, which does a bunch of stuff to your circulation.
Yeah.
And your blood flow. The next day I auditioned in what was literally a freezing cold arena. And I was so amped up that I was just at like 120% of just like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of that just led to my left arm going, you shouldn't have done all that.
Literally the definition of overdoing it.
Yes. My arm almost fell off of my body, and I was like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to keep going. I have to. And so look, it appears that one day shy of my 33rd birthday, I can talk about a traumatizing moment when I was 20. And this is the first time I've ever told that story to somebody who's not in my inner circle, if you will.
Well, thank you. I truly feel honored. Thanks a million for sharing it.
My pleasure at this point. Hopefully it was entertaining.
It was. I'm sure the listeners are going to love it. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. I don't know how, but 33 next year. Tomorrow. Sorry. Time's a blur, right? What
exactly?
What is time since March of last year? What is time really?
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just blurs by.
Yeah.
We'll get on to your best concert experience.
That is a no-brainer. 2007, I was one of the lucky few 20,000 who watched Led Zeppelin perform at the O2 Arena.
Oh, man.
Yes. And I actually had my two greatest concert going experiences that year of 2007, which I never thought I would ever experience. Led Zeppelin, of course, the Almighty. And I saw the Police on their reunion tour.
No way.
Two bands I never, ever thought I would see for obvious reasons. And I was lucky enough to go to both of those shows.
Oh, man. That is... I'm speechless. Getting to see the two of them now is... Oh.
Yeah. And the Police one was out of the blue. I was invited to go a few hours before the show. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Okay, great. Led Zeppelin, I was very fortunate enough to get a heads up because I knew, or I was playing with a band who was managed by the same company who's managing Jimmy Page. And basically that whole roster was able to, I mean, it was a benefit, it was a tribute concert for Ahmet Ertegun. So there was, you had the ability to buy tickets, which were phenomenal. I mean, Brian May was sitting in front of me, and Brian May is not going to get a shitty seat. So, so it was amazing. And shockingly, nobody in the band I was with who was able to get tickets wanted to go. So I bought them up and went with my family.
Oh, man.
And I went to London just for the show. And it's honestly the only time I've ever gotten choked up to music. And which may seem weird. I've been called a robot in the past, but I mean, clearly I love music, but like music hasn't made me cry or anything. I haven't, but watching three of my superheroes in person performing, which is something I never thought I would see, I had a very, very real moment of like, oh my God, I never thought I'd see this. And it was incredible for me.
Oh, I could imagine. Jesus. The amount of people that would have traded places with you right there. Well, maybe not sitting behind Brian May because the hair and everything.
Yeah. So whoever was sitting behind Brian May and me must have been really bummed.
Yeah.
No, but it was incredible. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there were 20 million applicants for tickets.
I'm not a bit surprised.
Yeah.
I have to say, I can't believe the guys in the band you're in didn't want to see Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I was like, you guys don't want to go see Led Zeppelin? What is wrong? Like, I'm like, can I buy your tickets? They're like, if you want to go for it. I'm like,
oh man.
Yes.
But like, even as musicians, every musician wants to see them. They are gods, like.
Yeah, well, they fall into the category of that's not cool music. And then I'm sure now they're probably like, you know what, Led Zeppelin's amazing. Maybe. I know the few who, at least one of the ones who I got along with best at the time, couldn't give a shit about the Beatles. Like, he'd rather listen to The Jam than the Beatles. And sure, listen to The Jam. You're not going to compare. Paul Weller wouldn't compare The Jam to the Beatles. And it wasn't until the guy was in his like late 30s and like having a daughter where he's probably like, you know what, the Beatles are really good. It's like, yeah, kind of been missing out ever since you've been alive, but whatever. It's cool. And hey, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of things that I have missed out on. Potentially out of ignorance, but I've always been the type of person where when I get into something, I'm so obsessive about it that I don't care about anything else.
Yeah.
I would rather listen to the one band or the one album over and over and over again until I feel, like I'm ready to get into something else.
Yeah, I can relate to that myself. I'd have one of them personalities where when I get interested in something, I need all of it, like
all of it. Yeah. New band or listen to this new bootleg. I'm going to listen to the new bootleg.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Can kind of be hurtful though to find a new band, new music. Like I have a couple of friends that are like, you're still listening to most of the same stuff you did when you were a teenager. I was like, yeah, but I was listening to like the Doors and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin when I was a teenager. So,
it's tough with music because like everybody finds what they like, but I suppose there is a difference. I mean, this is partially an excuse, but it's a legitimate one, I would say, where at this point in my life, I am fully involved in music, whether it is playing live, writing my own songs, collaborating on other songs, being in the studio, playing instruments for fun, learning new things, that the actual window of sitting down to explore new music doesn't really exist for me.
Right.
You know,
right.
if I listen to music for joy, it's because I want to listen to the music that I love.
Yeah, yeah.
If I'm listening to stuff that I don't know, it's usually as a reference. Like if I'm writing a song with somebody for their band or their project, or if I'm producing something, it's like, what kind of vibe are you in? What do you have any references? What are you thinking? What's the direction?
Yeah.
And music is music, so I can listen to it and be like, cool, I know the style, let's write. But what I will also say, which is not an excuse, is that 99 times out of 100, when I listen to these references, it's not like it's blowing my mind where I'm like, holy shit, I need to keep listening to this. It's kind of like, yeah, I get it. Let's write something. Cool.
Yeah.
You know, I wish I was just inundated with phenomenal music that I felt I needed to stop the world and just listen. But that has not happened in decades.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's not something that happens very often nowadays with music.
Yeah.
It's like all the best has passed.
And it's a real shame, but you know.
Yeah. We'll get slightly more personal for the last couple of questions then.
Hit me.
If you could, I probably know the answer to this. If you could see any performer from history in concert for one night only, who would it be?
I'll let you answer the question.
Led Zeppelin?
Yes.
Right.
Now, I have my reasons, though. I mean, I think in hindsight, seeing the Beatles, and this is a controversial statement, okay,
Right.
would be highly disappointing because of two factors. One, PA equipment was not up to snuff, and they would have either been inaudible or sounded like garbage. So if you realize that, let's say they were playing a baseball stadium, that they were using the actual PA for the announcers, which sound like tin cans, that would have been awful, right? So if you have 2021 versions of you and I going back with what we know about a concert going experience, and we just see these 4 tiny spots in the middle of a baseball field, and you hear nothing but screams and maybe a semblance of sound, that would have been terrible. The next disappointing thing is the Beatles only played for about 20 to 25 minutes. And most people don't know. Most people don't know that.
I actually didn't know that.
Beatles songs are fairly short. They'd play their singles. They would usually play on package tours with multiple bands. So they would go up, at the most half an hour, right?
Yeah.
Which is another thing for half an hour slots are for the opening band that you don't want to see, and you're happy that they're only playing for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes of those are spent figuring out technical difficulties, So it's like, it would be very disappointing. On the other hand, you have Led Zeppelin, which would have played anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 hours. In which case, if I'm watching my heroes and what I deem to be the greatest band of all time, and I mean literally in the sense of the best 4 musicians who made a fifth element that is unequaled.
Yeah.
3.5 hours would have been mesmerizing,
It's no contest, really.
Yeah, and I will say, though, if it was not Led Zeppelin, it would no doubt be Queen, because to experience Freddie Mercury live, I'm sure would be magical.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
If you could be locked in a room with any singer, performer from history, who would it be?
Locked in a room. Because locked in a room, that seems like kidnapping or like something weird's going to go down. Holy shit. It's a good question. It's a weird question. I'm going to exclude Michael Jackson for obvious reasons.
Good choice.
You know, I listen to Michael Jackson all the time. I don't want to be locked in a room with him for 24 hours.
But then you are in your 30s, so.
I may be safe. Now, you know, it's weird. It's like, I mean, I'm sure Freddie Mercury would be very fascinating. I feel like Robert Plant and I would really get along because I know he's into history.
Right.
So I think quite a few beers and a few cups of tea could be shared discussing British history or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I've had the absolute joy, honor, pleasure of meeting Paul McCartney a couple of times. I can say he is, I mean, calling him a stand-up gentleman is an understatement. But as, you know, being the greatest living icon of music, he couldn't have been any nicer. And having a conversation with him, it wasn't a guy who was like peering over your shoulder to see who else was in the room.
Yeah.
Or that he was like, I felt I'm having a conversation with McCartney and I'm floored at what a guy he was. It was really cool.
He comes across like that. He seems like the nicest man in showbiz almost. And like all the years of superstardom hasn't changed him from who he was before the Beatles.
Yeah. And I think he's just like, he's content, obviously, and comfortable being that huge. But rather than taking what I'm about to say in an egotistical way, I think he appreciates that everybody loves him.
Yeah.
It's not like everybody loves me because I'm fucking awesome, which is true. Yeah. And if anyone's going to be an asshole, sure, might as well be the most successful living songwriter of all time. But I think he's just appreciative that billions of people love him.
Yeah.
And like truly appreciate what he's done for over 50 years. So, you know who would be fascinating, but I heard this could go both ways.
Right.
Sting seems like a fascinating guy to me. I feel like there could be a lot of stimulating conversation, whether it be philosophy, history, psychology. He's a very, very multifaceted intellectual, but he also loves chess, which I love. And I think we could eat up quite a few hours playing chess alone. So, you know, with giving this more thought, other than like, who's my favorite? I actually think I could make 24 hours potentially pass by quickest with Sting.
Right.
We could play music, we could talk about many things, and we could play chess. That's a lot of time-eating activity right there.
Yeah. He actually, like, it would be great, and as you said, it could go either way, but he kind of comes across like he could be either like your best friend, or if he's having a bad day, stay clear of him. He seems like he could be really grumpy and intimidating.
And I've heard both, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet him, but here's the thing. A lot of people are like, don't meet your heroes, which I understand that. But, you know, I suppose if Sting was not nice to me, it wouldn't really affect anything because I would be prepared for it. Yeah, it's not like it's not like you have this image of this like angel of a guy and your perception is shattered because it's not what you expected.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In which case, if I met him and he was just kind of standoffish or didn't give a shit about me or whatever, which, you know, why would he? I'd be like, hey, it's Sting.
Yeah.
I'm going to go listen to The Police now. Okay.
I was actually looking forward to asking you that question because a couple of my guests on previous episodes, Eric Ferrantino's for one of Rat, his answer was he'd love to be locked in a room with Trent and Nine Inch Nails and see how that goes. Now, he did say he'd need a lot of drugs as well, but we'll leave that out.
You know, if Trent likes you, sure, but I don't think Trent would want to be in a room with anybody for 24 hours.
Yeah.
You know, I think being a reserved and quiet, introspective person does not lend itself to being locked in a room with another individual for 24 hours.
No, especially not someone who's kind of a stranger.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Good question, though.
Thank you. And the final question is, if there was a song that could appear on the soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
Another fascinating question, my friend.
Thank you. I do try.
God, it's so shitty because I don't know the answer, and I'm literally like going through the Rolodex of the 3-4 bands we've talked about this entire time. I don't know.
It is one of them questions you kind of need to, ponder for a long time.
There's so like musically, I wouldn't say this song, but lyrically, it's one of the few songs where I'm in like, that kind of describes a way that I feel.
Right.
Which is an odd thing to say because most people, especially people who are more into lyrics than, say, the music itself, find words that speak to them and they can relate to. That's not very important to me as a listener. I try to write lyrics in a way that can connect, but this is my long way of saying, not this song, but lyrically, Beach Boys, I Just Wasn't Made for These Times.
Okay.
Is a song where I'm like, I often feel that way. And I don't, that's not to be misconstrued as ego or anything like that, but I genuinely feel, at least for the time being, musically speaking, I should say, I was born at the wrong time.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think there's a lot of people that can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. It's like, what's the song to your life? If I were to say like Kashmir, what does that have to do with my life? Nothing. I just love that song. So good question, but yet again, not the best answer.
No, it was good. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, your song Talk, Talk, Talk will be playing us out. Would you like to just tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. As I said at the beginning, I do love the song. I'm very proud of it. For those who don't know anything about me, or this is their first introduction to me, and having heard us go on about the Beatles and Queen, I don't think they'll be surprised to hear an influence of those two giants in this song. But from a musical standpoint, there was a definitive effort and a sort of fighting back against the overly produced, sterile music that is so prevalent today. There are so many songs that go nowhere, that may repeat one phrase over and over and over again. The structures are boring, the sounds are boring, and it's almost the production itself that is the only thing carrying the song. So I was just like, screw that. I'm not doing that. I'm just going to sit at my piano. I'm going to write a song, and it's going to be traditional instrumentation, which is something I've always used, but I've always taken pride in a sort of hybrid approach of, bass, drums, guitar with the occasional piano, but I'm going to mix in some sequencing and electronics, synths, what have you. But this is like, no, drums, bass, guitar, piano. I will write some string arrangements, some brass arrangements, and this will be a production in the traditional sense, a production that comes from, and I don't mean this to sound pretentious, but a production that comes from a musical knowledge.
Yeah.
Presets and technology are great, but a whole lot of production comes from sifting through sounds and being like, that's the sound. And cool. Doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there. But that's very different to the production of, say, George Martin,
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm going to craft a song for the sake of crafting a work that I can stand behind, that's still catchy, that's still well played, but the song stands on its own feet without any sort of exterior help. The song is built by the music. Its ornaments are harmony and like I said, some light orchestration and there's a bit of sophistication there. And I don't mean that once again, in a pretentious way, or like this is thinking music. It's not. It's just what music used to be when, say, a pop band like the Beach Boys wanted to strive for something. They would then make their harmonies more intricate or stretch out their structures a bit more. And same thing with the Beatles. I mean, and Queen, that's the way these guys used to do it. It's like, okay, we want to be popular. We want to be catchy. But how do we push the art form forward? I feel like people have not thought about that in quite some time. At least what is currently most popular.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is my reaction to, I'm so sick of hearing mundane bullshit that goes nowhere and is reliant on production. So that's my rant about where it came from musically. And lyrically, it's not hard to decipher. A lot of it has to do with impatience and just really wanting to move forward in more ways than what. I mean, it's left open intentionally, and I'm kind of skimming through the lyrics in my mind, but it's like you've had enough with the status quo, but you're impatient about the pace at which you can move forward and kind of change things up. And the reason why it's called Talk, Talk, Talk is because, the hook in the chorus goes, talk, talk, talk has never been so cheap. Can't remember half of what I hear. Everyone's firing on all cylinders, but it's just really a bunch of white noise that you have to sift through. And then the following line alludes to, and another year has gone by and there hasn't really been anything fruitful from it, at least in my experience, my perspective. And I need to somewhat retract that because I've had a lot of great things happen in the past year. But a lot of this, I mean, now a married man here, so that is a fantastic thing, of course. But I feel like I generally operate from my distaste for things and things that I don't think are where they should be or as good as they should be. So when I write a song, it's like, God, I'm so sick of hearing this. I'm going to write this.
Yeah.
Or and at the time when I wrote it, actually, which was pre-engagement, pre-marriage, so I can kind of get away with what I was saying sooner.
Right.
There was plenty of just like, everyone's full of shit. I mean, we all know that. We live in a world where we spend most of our time staring at one screen or another. And what we are looking at is other people trying to project their vision or their image of their reality, which is 9 times out of 10 a fabrication or an exaggeration. And often enough, these are the kinds of people who have an uncanny ability to communicate to millions of people. And then as this sort of trend grows and more people kind of get sucked into this vortex of nothingness, it's just, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So it's like time genuinely feels like it is traveling at a faster pace than ever with less to show for it. That's how I feel. And while all of this may not be obvious in the lyrics, these are the kinds of the things constantly, like pinballing in the back of my brain that inevitably come in lyrics. So, yeah.
Well, it's amazing to actually, have a musician nowadays who doesn't want to just stand in line and follow the rest, release the same crap music all the time, who actually puts their soul, their energy, their thoughts into the song, and cares so much about the lyrics. And, as you said, it means something,
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, I wish it was as simple as just blaming lazy musicians or songwriters. You're always going to have those. But, and I don't mean to be the, fight the man kind of guy, because that's not where my statement is about to come from. But I do feel, I'm giving you a micro tangent right here, but I do feel that analytics have become an enormous problem for music, because music is clearly subjective. And usually, or I shouldn't say usually, but for the longest time, the music that you found out about was the music that at some point started out with somebody believing in it, and then a company getting behind it to sign it, record it, and distribute it, right?
Yeah.
So you, in a way, were aware of what was put out for you or promoted for you. And then that kind of stemmed out into different formats and genres and all that stuff. And of course, there have always been indie labels which put out other things. And you have all those aficionados and people who are always on the hunt for things that weren't the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
And great, all the credit to them. And you would think in theory that being able to say, anybody out there can put out music, which of course that's great. Anybody can distribute music and doesn't need a label. Of course that's great. But when you can track everything, the element of believing something is reduced to almost non-existent. And the confidence in investing in something has to do almost entirely with what the data is showing them. So at this point in time, labels, for example, are interested in things that are already streaming well, things that are already doing well, in which case they just see this is already doing well without us, but with our money, it should be, it's a safer bet for them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it sucks because nowadays with TikTok, you can have some nonsense makeup challenge or dance challenge or whatever the fuck it is. And because there's a song in the background that people may find catchy, if that video gets millions of views, and as a result, people start liking that song, it doesn't even matter if that song came from somebody who's not even an active artist or pursuing music. It's like, we need to find who this person is because millions of people already like it and we can capitalize on it. It's like so everything becomes about what is already proving to be sort of tested in the market without having any money invested into it. And then they just see how they can push that along further to make their jobs easier and make easier money. But as we all know, quick money is quick money, and long-term money is the stuff that will pay for decades if you find the right act, the right band, solo artist who actually has what it takes to sustain a multi-decade career. Does the song in this talk video have that? No. And if I'm wrong, I will retract that statement, but I would be willing to bet almost anything that you're not going to find that from TikTok or some viral artist. And that's not taking away from viral artists per se, because if it truly is something great and that's why it's going viral, then awesome.
Yeah.
But it's a real shame that everything has been reduced to numbers. Like I would also bet almost anything that a label A&R guy would look at numbers before they'd listen to music.
Without a doubt. Oh, you know,
which is, I mean, that's really the most concise way of summing up what I just ranted about. You know?
Yeah, and it really speaks that to those guys, the music doesn't matter. They don't care at all about the music. You know, it's only the numbers and how much money they'll make back. Yeah, there's no risk involved with them in taking a risk on an unknown band, a band they've just found. You know, it makes it harder for the guys, you know, the guys that could be the next Beatles or the next Led Zeppelin, you know?
Yeah, the irony is that these bands that were signed because of how great they were are the back catalogs that are financing a lot of these people to this day, which is the irony.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I hope the table turns in some form or another that is beneficial to the musician. But it's really tough, you know?
Yeah. I can imagine. Well, I know you're a busy man, and we've got through all the questions.
Well, I do appreciate it. I am going to head out to rehearsals, but it was a real pleasure, and thanks for taking the time.
I really enjoyed it. you're definitely one of the coolest musicians out there. And really, I can't believe how down to earth you are. You know, I knew you were down to earth, but seriously, you're such a cool, down to earth guy.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'll tell my parents later because they'll appreciate that.
Thanks a million for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure. Take care and great to meet you.
You too. You too. All the best.
Everyone I know is said to me, you've got to take things slow and breathe. But I cannot wait, drowning in my dreams of what could be, when everything I see is staring at the seams. Lie after lie after lie, giving my mind
Hey guys, I just want to say thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on iTunes. Subscribe on your favourite podcast player of choice and all that other good stuff. Find us and follow us on social media. And be sure to check out the website. Until next time, keep rocking.
Hey, what are you guys still doing here? The show's over. It's over. You can go home. Go on. We'll see you next time. We'll be here. Bye.